Mind the windows, Tino, is what Freddie Flintoff said to the West Indian number 11 Tino Best at Lord's. A few minutes later, Tino would swing big again, and England would have a tail wicket. That story has stuck around for quite a few years, when Freddie talked Tino into coaxing away his wicket. Weirdly, for a man so well known for dismissing a tail-ender with his Jedi mind tricks, Flintoff struggled with the ball. Like most things with Flintoff, the story was more important than the facts. He was a massive character, both physically and mentally. A strong man with a sense of vulnerability about him. He looked like he could take down an entire army on his own one day and then would go missing a week later. When he retired, he made documentaries about fish and chips, while also wrestling and racing cars. He was always a cricketer first, but he was a personality and celebrity pretty close behind that. Because of all that, and his incredible ability to rise up for a huge moment, he became the sort of cricketer who was more than his stats. But Flintoff could bowl, fast, heavy, and with skill. He tried to play things off as a big dumb oaf, but there was a lot going on with his cricket. And while his batting and fielding could be really good as well, he was at his absolute best with the ball in his hand. A physical force through the crease, like pounding down his steps and then pounding down the ball. There was a lot of pounding. His bowling was very loud. But he ended up with an average of more than 30, which if you watched him play, seems ridiculous. On his day, he looked as good as anyone, but he never took the wickets to back that up. Flintoff had the same flaw as most England bowlers, even if he wasn't really a typical English seamer. The big man could not get the tail out. And for more than 50 years, England has had the exact same issue. I have travelled the cricketing world, and so I've collected two things: the phone numbers of random taxi drivers and overseas SIM cards. Rideshare apps have fixed the first part, and Sally is doing the second. Now, all you need is their eSIM on whatever plan works for you. You activate it and you can use it anywhere in the cricketing world. It helps you save money. It is a global solution to a global problem. Stop fiddling with tiny SIMs and get the one that does it all. Go to Sally.com Good Areas and use the code Good Areas to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. Fly free with Sally. When Test cricket started, it took months for a team to arrive at their tour. Australia was not a country. South Africa was basically just another English team. Batters didn't have helmets or proper gloves. The pitches had literal crap on them. The balls, the stumps, and the LBW laws were all different. People still bowled underarm on occasion, and the game in the 1870s could not be any more different than the current sport we see today. Yet in that first decade, from only 3 tests, the average for numbers 8 to 11 was 15.3. And 150 years later, the tail averaged 0.6 runs a wicket less. So the sport has changed. But the fact that we picked the last few players to bowl, or keep once upon a time as well, meaning that they usually can't make any runs, stays true. There have only been 4 decades where the averages were lower than 14 for the bottom 4 batters, and the same for more than 16. Outside the glorious tail-end batting of 1920s, it has been almost exactly the same every single decade, throughout the entire history of cricket. The other constant thing is fans talking about how their team can't dismiss the tail. Almost every single fan base in the world thinks their bowlers can't get them out quick enough. That is because in our mind, the innings is over. And so any delay, even like the most minor one, seems huge to us. Just bowl at the stumps, just bounce them, just finish them. But while the tail can't bat, they're also nowhere near as bad as I think we believe they are. Number 8s obviously do okay, averaging just over 20. 9s are holding in at 15.5. The penultimate spot is at 11.5, and the actual last man is at 8.5. So while fans are sitting there screaming that they should be out already, the truth is they can stick around. And while we know that intellectually, it is so goddamn annoying when a bloke who cannot bat is been every awkward defensive shot. We all think that our team cannot bowl to the tail because of all the lived-in memories of our side doing that. But there is one fan base who actually might be right. England have been poor bowling to the tail since the start of the 1980s. And some of that was when they've been bad. But really, they've just been consistently poor against the worst batters. Throughout the early history of the game, they had no real issue with this. But then from the 1980s onwards, they've just not found a way to get through the worst batters. These are decades that include Bob Willis, Ian Botham, Darren Gough, Andy Caddick, Freddie Flintoff, Steve Harmison, Jimmy Anderson, and Stuart Broad. There's a lot of talent there with the ball, except when they're going up against people who don't play it very well. Now, since 1980, they are not the worst. That would be Zimbabwe and Afghanistan. But that makes England the third worst, and that is pretty bad. Considering Bangladesh's history in tests, being behind them on this list is not ideal. England is actually right in the middle of the 4 newest teams. So if you look at everyone who started tests before 1990, England are actually the worst. For 50 years, one thing has been very clear. England cannot bowl to the tail. And then last test, Josh Tongue does his thing. And suddenly you wonder if England has actually found a bowler who can do the one thing they've been looking for forever. Finish the innings. This is all the players in the ball-by-ball era who have taken 60 wickets of batters in the top 4 and 30 from the tail. The curve in the middle shows the kind of normal pattern. The ones on top of it are much better against the top order, and the ones below feast on the tail. So you can see that Glenn McGrath is the best in the database against top order, but more normal when he bowls against the tail. Whereas Shoaib Akhtar is pretty good against the top order, but he rolled over the Rabbits with a tank. And that is because he was pure, unadulterated, raw, uncut pace. Guys like him or Warne and Murley are also very good against the tail. Bowlers who are fast, spin the ball sideways, anything extreme really bother part-time batters. So England's best bowler against the tail is someone that you would just not guess, partly because he's nothing like that. Matthew Hogarth was their new ball bowler with the automatic outswinger in the early 2000s. He's no one's idea of extreme or terrifying. He was a very good, nagging professional bowler, the kind who would bowl all day unless you made him stop. Into the wind, up the slope, running through treacle. It didn't matter. And he had a very good career. We have him as 12% better than the seamers in his games. Skills-wise, he did have a very good Yorker and was very accurate. Steve Harmison told me that he was really good at using his angles, and because he was so accurate, he could always keep the stumps in play. And unlike a lot of other bowlers, Hogarth was willing to bowl very full and get hit back down the ground. And so he was always looking for tail-end wickets, and he always found them. When talking to Robbie on the Kimber podcast about this, he was talking about how some bowlers like Hogarth are very good against the tail just because of how accurate they are. But I think the real key to that is how you change your lengths and lines. The best ball to a top player in cricket has generally been a ball shaping away just outside off stump. That's the ball that tail-enders miss. This leads to frustration and sometimes just poor balls follow. Then the captain usually tells the bowler to pitch it up. But seamers spend most of their time delivering on their natural length. In fact, many seamers, when they pitch it up, deliver the ball in a bit of a floaty way, and the tail-enders can soar off that. So you have to work out your own method. And weirdly enough, many English bowlers do not. Jimmy Anderson was about the same against the tail and the top order. The 2 bowlers from Durham, Harmison and Ben Stokes, are decent against the tail, but despite their extra pace, are not brutal against it. But the real story here is above the line. Most English fans will have complained about Stuart Broad against the tail, so that one is known. And you can see that they have 3 finger spinners and none of them do much against the batters at the end. But they also have here Chris Woakes and Freddie Flintoff, who really struggle with the tail. They both would have far better records just being normal against the bunnies. It looks more glaring when you bring back the other teams. Let's leave off the Asian teams and focus on the ones with more seam-friendly environments. You can see that the English players rise to the top here. I mean, they stick out in a very bad way. Look at them compared to the West Indies, who seem to have only great bowlers at the tail, or guys who do very well against the top order, which is not ideal, but it's actually quite a good pattern. South Africa, Ntini is up near Broad, and Callis is an all-rounder. Everyone else is par or better against the tail. Crucially, that includes Maharaj. That is something that English spinners just don't do. The Australian bowlers don't usually specialise against the tail, but they don't struggle much either. Hazelwood sticks out, but he's still decent against the bottom order. He's just really, really good against the top 4. And with guys like Mitchell Johnson and Warne, they've really never had that many issues. But I think the team most like England in terms of bowlers and conditions is New Zealand. So you'd assume they'd be similar. In fact, I did assume this, and they are not. Vittori was good against the tail. Trent Boult was fantastic, and Matt Henry has been even better. But I think the real story here is above the line. Chris Martin is up near Flintoff, and he's someone who was very good against the top order and could not work out the bottom at all. But other Kiwis are not in this area. So why is it that English traditional seamers are not as good as New Zealand traditional seamers against the tail? Now this graphic is limited. It doesn't include the 80s or 90s bowlers. But we know that New Zealand is good at this over a long period of time and that England has not been. And neither side is particularly good at creating mystery spin or ragging turn. And they aren't really known for their out and out heat bowlers either. Yet the Kiwis managed to end the innings so much better than England do. And yes, their bowling attacks are not exactly identical. Bolt has taken a lot more wickets than England's best left armour, Ryan Sidebottom. England has never had a Neil Wagner, although they've definitely tried. But the Kiwis also haven't had a lot of Hummersons or Flintoffs. They have had Richard Hadley, Tim Southey, Matt Henry, Simon Doull, Ian O'Brien, Chris Martin. These are all basically English seamers, right? But as a collective, they work out the tail. England do not. However, that's not to say that they've never had a bowler who can do that. We don't have Darren Goff's full numbers, but from the end of his career, he took 16 wickets against the tail at an average of 7.87. Those numbers obviously wouldn't hold up for his entire career, but with Goff's speed, swing and Yorkers, he was certainly an issue for the tail in the 90s. Simon Jones was another one. Because of injuries, he never even finished with 60 victims. But you could see in that small sample size, he averaged 44.5 against the top order, but 14.3 against the tail. Goff and Jones are really not traditional English seamers. Neither is Josh Tongue. So could he be the tail eraser that England needs? A week ago, that wasn't even a question, but now it has to be. Tongue is fast, if not super quick, but his weird action and release is the sort of thing that tailenders just don't like. It makes sense that he would be tough for them to line up. And so far, in Test cricket, that has been the case. He's averaged 31 against the top order, but a staggering 9.4 against the tail. However, that is not from many matches or wickets. So the best thing would be to look at his record in county cricket. According to statistician Gary Morgan, he's averaging 30 against the top 4, but 19.4 against the tail, from 51 wickets. That's quite a large sample size, and it does suggest that what he did to India is pretty rare. In Tests, almost all of his tail end wickets so far have been against India in that last match. And outside of that, he didn't take many against Ireland, Australia, or Zimbabwe. And some of those tails are not great. Bryden Carter is another bowler who looks like he could bowl well to the tail. So far, he's killing the top order players at 28. But against the men at the end, it's only 22. Neither of these are traditional English seamers. So they would be hoping that one of them would be able to take the tail. But they have been trying to find a guy like this for a long time. And usually they don't. And Flintoff is the gold standard for this. Earlier we just looked at averages, which is a good start, but not a perfect method for doing this. So we looked at the average of the batters up to the date when each bowler went at them, and then we looked at the median of those batting averages by positions. It tells you a little bit more about the strength of the top and the tail that they went up against. So this moves people around a little bit, and you see Bumrah, Rabada and Shoaib jump back in as guys who absolutely destroyed the tail, which makes sense for all three, and McGrath and Hazelwood pop as top order kings. But if we look at just England alone, that is when we see something very crazy. Our basic stats have some of them as decent against the tail. On the advanced, we don't have a single English player who's above average against the bottom 4. Even our legendary Hoggard slips back a little bit. Let's look at Flintoff, who was clearly a top-class bowler, but someone who ended up with an average above 30. He wasn't the only one of his era. Chris Martin and Zahid Khan were also world-class, but they also ended up averaging more than 30. All of them were basically half as good against the tail as they were against the top order. Not learning to bowl to tailenders is the worst thing for your bowling average. It's the bowler's version of stat padding. Once we look at Martin's efficiency by position, we can see how good he is against the top 7 and that he can't handle 8, 9 or 11, with a weird positive blip against number 10s. Zahid Khan has another odd moment with number 4s. But again, he's really fantastic against the top order players, and then from the moment the number 8s come out, he's busted. But no one shows this better than Freddie. He is about par against openers, but if you take his numbers from number 4, it is basically a decline all the way down to number 11. The worse the batters are, the less he knows how to dismiss them. There is also technical analysis that should be mentioned here, because Flintoff bowled back of a length, and his best ball was too good for most top order players. And so the guys down the order just missed it a lot. So let's just say, as Varun did, that England bowlers aren't usually good versus the tail because they're naturally in the channel and they don't have as much pace. You could also add in the spinners question here too. That all makes sense, except for the two giant asterisks, that Kiwi bowlers should be the same, And Flintoff is not that kind of English bowler at all. So we asked ChatGPT, and it said that England bowlers are too cute and English captains are too funky, which sure might be how people think now, but they weren't too cute in the 80s and they were funkless in the 90s. And even if that's true, if you pair it together with what Varun said, we're basically saying that they're too boring and too impatient at the same time. So there is no one reason why England don't take the tail. But they don't, and they haven't for a very long time.
Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today.